Let me give you some context so the story I'm about to tell you is more understandable. Our cat Cosmo has always slept in the basement. Every night since I was a little kid, our parents would scoop him up from wherever he was lounging and stick him in the basement. They detested all the cat hair he'd leave behind on their bed, which I guess was understandable. He was also an outdoor cat, so if one of us forgot to put him in the basement at night, he'd wake my parents up at 3 a.m. screaming to be let out. The basement's huge, the biggest room in our house, so I figured he liked having all that space. A little over 2 weeks ago, as I'm writing this, he started acting weird. There's a little landing at the top of the basement stairs just behind the door. That's where we'd usually put him. After a few minutes, he'd walk down the stairs and sleep on whatever piece of furniture he pleased. One night, I placed him delicately on the landing and gently shut the door, something I'd done a million times. As I was filling my water glass in the kitchen, though, I heard him meowing from behind the door. That was odd. He usually trotted down the stairs immediately. I finished filling my glass and walked over to the door, wondering if someone had maybe forgotten to fill his dish. I opened the door, and he darted out into the living room as if he were chasing something. I checked the dish, and it was completely full. Weird, I thought, turning to go find him. I put him back on the landing step, closed the door, and that was that. The next 2 nights were essentially the same. I'd put him on the landing, close the door, and start getting ready for bed. After a few minutes, I'd hear him repeatedly meowing. I'd go over to the door, and it was always the same thing. He'd just linger at the top of the stairs, refusing to go down. I worried that maybe he was just getting old, but that was a thought I didn't want to confront just yet. It killed me to do it, but I just ignored him, knowing he'd walk down the stairs eventually. The day after that, he refused to enter the house at all. Usually when he wanted to come in, he'd just hang out at our front steps or by the back door until one of us saw him through the glass and let him inside. At one point, I noticed him curled up on our doormat. I went to let him in, but he didn't move. I went out and petted him a little before going back inside. A few hours later, I walked by the door again and saw that he still hadn't moved. It was getting late, so I picked him up and carried him inside, which he wasn't too happy about. I knew he didn't want to go to sleep downstairs, so I let him sleep in my room that night. It wasn't a big deal, and he seemed a lot calmer that way. Of course, that solution didn't last. For the next few days, my dad kept complaining that someone was leaving the basement door open. He was mad because it was letting all the cool air escape downstairs. Air conditioning wasn't free, which was something he loved reminding us. I assumed it was my sister. She's always been the type to leave doors and drawers open without thinking. I didn't really pay it that much thought. I was just happy that Cosmo seemed to have mellowed out after being allowed to sleep in my room. One night, I woke up randomly in the middle of the night. In my groggy, half-awake state, I glanced over to the door and saw something weird. There was a silhouette standing in my bedroom doorway. It was just standing there, perfectly still. I could tell it was a person because I could see their outline in the faint glow of the lamp we'd leave on in the den. I figured it had to be my sister, so I called out to her, but the figure moved away without a word. I was too tired to figure out what she wanted, so I just went back to sleep. A couple of days later, we discovered what had been keeping Cosmo away from the basement. A flea infestation. The whole place was crawling with them. It was disgusting. We assumed the fleas were the reason Cosmo had refused to go down there, which made sense, but it was strange how they came out of nowhere. We'd never had a flea problem before, and Cosmo always wore a flea collar. My dad yelled at my mom for not changing out his collar, even though she swore she had. My dad went all out, tearing through every corner of the basement to clean it thoroughly. We vacuumed the carpets, sprayed the entire room, and washed everything down with flea-killing solutions. He told us to stay out of the basement for the next few days so that any stragglers would die off without a host. It seemed like a good plan, and I figured that'd be the end of it. But then, a few nights later, another strange thing happened. I was lying in bed when I noticed light seeping in under my door, flickering on and off like someone was playing with the hallway switch. I told myself it was probably just my dad getting up to use the bathroom or something. But the flickering continued, going on for longer than seemed normal. It was starting to freak me out, but I couldn't bring myself to check it out. I lay there, heart pounding, staring at the bottom of the door, hoping it would stop. Eventually, it did. I forced myself to fall asleep after that, but I've never felt more uneasy in my life. A few more days passed without incident. My dad said the basement was probably clear, which was great because I had been missing playing video games down there. After getting home from school, I went down to the basement. As soon as I got down the stairs, though, I noticed something was wrong. There were still fleas down there, a decent amount of them. It didn't make any sense. After all the cleaning, they should have been long gone. I went back upstairs to call my dad at work, but he just said to give it time. He insisted that any fleas left would die soon enough. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else going on, though. It wasn't normal for fleas to keep thriving like that after everything we'd done. So the next day after school, I decided to investigate a bit further. I went down to the back of the basement and into the storage room where we kept some old boxes and tools, figuring maybe a rodent had gotten in and died somewhere. I opened the door and instantly knew I was right. The smell hit me almost immediately. This thick, rotten stench that clung to the air and made my eyes water. I followed the smell to the far end of the room, where there was an unfinished crawl space that connected to the plumbing for the whole house. It was pitch black back there, and the smell only got stronger as I stepped closer. I didn't want to go in there. It was too dark anyway. I turned to grab a flashlight, and that's when I heard it. Breathing. It was faint at first, but steady, like someone was hiding in there. I froze. I felt a pit forming in my stomach. The breathing got louder, as if whoever or whatever it was coming closer. I backed away. Before I could react, I saw a figure lunge toward the end of the crawl space, moving fast. A hand reached out for me, but I jumped away before it could grab me. I didn't stay to get a better look. I ran upstairs as fast as I could, slammed the basement door shut, and called the police. When they arrived, they searched the house, but there was no sign of anyone. They found some empty chip bags and food wrappers stashed in the crawl space, but that was it. Whoever had been down there had escaped through the storm door at the back of the basement. The officer said it was probably a homeless person who'd snuck in looking for shelter, but I couldn't help but wonder how long they'd been living there and how much they'd seen. My parents were twice as shocked as I was. We've kept the basement door locked ever since, and Cosmo still won't go anywhere near that door.